Good evening. Welcome to Rose City Politics. It is July 28th. Our regular panel tonight includes Doug Sartori coming to us from the base of the Rensen.
Good evening. Doing great. Well, we're going to be talking about bold new community infrastructure tonight in one of our segments. So I thought I would dig into some local bold infrastructure choices, and the people mover bubbled to the top.
It's fair. I like it. Very close to monorail. And there's a whole song that we could tap into as well. I, of course, am John Lidke. I am coming to you from the reimagined University Avenue. It's Star Trek. It's San Francisco at its best in the future. We have a guest panelist tonight as well. If you're not able to see him on screen, he is the Ward 9 City of Windsor Councillor. It's Kieran McKenzie. Kieran, how are you, Councillor?
Oh, I'm doing quite well this evening. Thanks for having me on again. It's kind of like pretty close in terms of my last appearance. Almost feeling like old times.
It's good. It's nice to be able to, again, like I get to tap into what the old show was sort of like, living vicariously through these haphazard Zoom setups and bringing on, other guests who were part of it. So it's nice for me specifically, but I'm sure that the audience likes it too. We don't get many complaints when you're on.
Well, we'll see if we can hit a new low there.
Yeah, it feels,
as we often do.
It feels like classic RCP. All we need is a segment about international trade on the agenda to make it perfect though.
There's a way that the conversation can find its way to that, I think.
It always does.
Yeah.
Well, looking forward to seeing when that happens. That's where you as the audience takes a drink along with us. Just kidding with that though. But please support us. Become a Patreon subscriber at patreon.com/Rose City Politics. We appear in print monthly in BizX Magazine and online at bizxmagazine.com. Please be sure to like, share, and subscribe to us wherever you go on social media or get your podcasts. We're all over the place. And we at Rose City Politics have been able to broadcast live on tape via Zoom thanks to the kind support of LiUNA 625, Building Better Communities. We've got three really cool topics that we're going to be talking about tonight. Cool in the sense that you're going to have to try to keep your cool through one of them. And then actually moving through the other two topics, there is some pretty great things that are on the tap here for Windsor. Up first, though, we'll be talking with our guest tonight, Councillor McKenzie. Specifically, that's why we brought him on to talk about this diversity committee. They're really angry. They were left out of the Windsor new anti-racism project. We spoke about this last week on the program, so we will be diving a bit more into this issue specifically as well now as it keeps to evolve. We're going to be moving on beyond that to a city council unanimous vote to move forward with a city-led homelessness hub. I know the councillor is really excited to talk about that. There was some back and forth we were having just in the pre-show about some of the really good that's going to be coming from it and how astounding it is that we've actually gotten to this point so quickly. So you're going to want to stay tuned for that. And then finally, this is one that I heard about first in 2018 when it first became public. It's the repurposing of University Avenue from the University Huron Church straight down to, I believe, McDougall. We'll get to the story specifically where it goes down to, but it's connecting that university hub with the downtown hub and using, quite frankly, a street that's really wide, maybe for some different purposes. So we'll get to all of that. And of course, our favorite new segment for your consideration. But let's dive right into this. This was a CBC Windsor exclusive. Katerina Georgieva put this one out yesterday on the 27th. Titled, Diversity Committee Very Angry. They were left out of Windsor's new anti-racism project. The chair was actually, quote, furious at the awarding of $200,000 to the Multicultural Council of Windsor and Essex County for the initiative, given the fact that the Diversity Committee was already working on a similar project. Peter Ija, Diversity Committee chair, had a pretty blunt quote that he says, "The carpet was pulled underneath us." Now, on May 3rd of this year, Council approved that the Diversity Committee could put together an anti-racism initiative in partnership with the Windsor-Essex Local Immigration Partnership to address racism in the community specifically. And the two organizations were in the process of establishing strategies and methodologies. Now, Ija, who is also a member of the Black Council of Windsor-Essex, says the diversity committee was also not consulted, just like we heard last week from Leslie McCurdy. He says very clearly the city lied. They lied very, very seriously. So this is where we're gonna stop with the background on the story, because there's places that we're gonna go with it as well. But you know, Councillor, I want you to address just right off the bat here. I mean, you know, you were one of the votes to move forward with this. It was just Councillor Holt and Bordelin that were the opposing votes for the overall $200,000 that was awarded to the Multicultural Council. So, you know, I'll let you, I guess, you know, just, you know, take the floor and address it from your perspective here. I don't want to come at you with a specific question. That'll come later.
Oh, okay. I look forward to that. Thanks for the intro and the the unpacking of the issue to where we are now. I will add that it was in fact me that brought forward the motion to. In fact, it was a friendly amendment to the administrative recommendation to proceed with the $200,000 worth of programming directed to the Multicultural Council as an addendum to that, and it was supported by the mover, who I forget who the mover was. It might have been Councillor Gignac, in fact. I asked that moving forward that the Multicultural Council, that the Diversity Committee be consulted throughout the process of the program development, because what we heard from the MCC throughout the discussion is that we're at the starting point of developing programs to address anti-racism in our community, and that those discussions will be ongoing. And you know, I heard loud and clear, and I saw the message from Peter that came before, or even before our council meeting, indicating that he was that as the chair of the diversity committee, that he had not been and they had not been consulted with respect to the specific initiative that was being considered at council that day, and that they'd felt that they'd been left out of the process. So and of course, you know, Leslie brought some really powerful comments to council that day that resonated, I think, with every single one of us, regardless of the position that you had on the actual motion. Certainly resonated with me. So I'll say this with respect to how we got to where we were on that Monday, a week ago Monday. I think that there were some good things that happened in the lead up to it. And I think that there were some mistakes. And one of the mistakes that we make a lot as a council, and I've sought to try to correct this, and there's some logistical challenges that are within what I'm about to unpack, but there's also some just political will piece also that needs to be recognized. Our advisory committees, and the diversity committee is an advisory committee to council. All of those advisory committees, whether they be the bike committee, the transit advisory committee, the diversity committee, international relations, all of the ABCs that fall under the C's that fall under that category, they meet quarterly. And there's a council rhythm to the way the agenda goes forward. And there's a way that, again, the advisory committees meet, you know, once every 3 months. So to try to align those two things sometimes is a challenge. It's not a good reason for the diversity committee to feel as though they've been left out of an initiative like the one we dealt with on the Monday that we dealt with it. It could have been done much, much better. And there are plenty of examples. And I just don't think that people at the senior levels of our, sometimes what happens with the way that these files come forward is that it doesn't align it strongly enough with the advisory committee, and it sort of is a step in the process that gets skipped. I don't think that's a good way to do public policy. If you have advisory committees, they should have the opportunity to advise. So that's what was embedded into the motion that I brought forward, and was the condition for me to be able to support the initiative. That at the very least, if what I was hearing, that there was going to be ongoing discussions with respect to how everything is going to be acted upon once council gives its approval, that the diversity committee be an active participant in that process as we continue to move forward. So I was happy that the mover, and again, I believe it was Councillor Gignac, was gonna, you know what? I'm sorry, I'm gonna check that. As I'm recalling it, the friendly amendment was not accepted, and I had to bring it forward as a separate motion after the original motion, which was disappointing. Because I think we would have had a better opportunity to pass things with a little bit, perhaps with greater unanimity, maybe not. But it certainly, as one complete motion, would have been much better or tidier, in my opinion, rather than having to have two motions, and one 8-2 and the other one 7-3 or whatever it was. I've talked a lot there. Maybe I'll just sort of stop for a second, catch my breath, and let you guys respond to or ask any questions you might have around the initiative itself, because I think that that's also, we got to unpack that, setting aside the shortcomings of it. I think there's also some positive things that we can pull out of it as well. But
yeah, we'll get there, Kieran, for sure. But I wanted to dig in on something, and I really appreciate the your explanation and the way that you saw it, and I do recall your amendment and the way that went down. We have Mr. Ija and as well Leslie McCurdy both using the word lie about them and their organizations being listed as having been consulted. I want to connect that to a couple of other things. When AD Knox came to council and that consultation was presented, I think that it's fair to say there were a lot of voices in the community that felt that consultation was very inadequate. The ward meetings that have happened virtually, I attended the ward meeting in my ward, and so presuming that they were all similar, were very managed, extremely stage managed, far more than I can recall even at the traditional in-person ward meetings. And at least from my perspective, I have a strong sense that the approach that the city is taking to consultation needs a serious rethink, and that it doesn't appear to be adequate to really reflect the mood and the needs and the desires of residents. So I want to ask you what you think about that characterization, and what, if anything, that you think should change about the way the city consults with the community.
It's a great question, and I think it's actually $1 million question. It's maybe the question. How do we do that better? And when you look at what happened with respect to AD Knox, and you look at what happened with respect to the anti-racism initiative, and many levels, many of the people that both of those initiatives seek to help, and the folks that perhaps should, at the end of whatever is done, should benefit from, there's the sense at the front of it that that's not going to happen. And there's a fundamental level of distrust that exists between folks in the community who are impacted by initiatives that the city is undertaking. And that, I think that does speak to a question of process. Are we doing it right, the city? And I think it's fair to say there's a lot of room for improvement. There's absolutely no doubt. And it's something that I'm very interested in resolving and working to improve. And because I think at the end of the day, when you have, we have some consensus around there's a problem and we need to work towards a solution. That literally, I think that's more than half the battle. That's like 3/4 of the battle. When you have some degree of consensus around, let's say, not just the community table, but the folks who are ultimately going to make a decision on something. When we unanimously said we want to go down this road of creating an anti-racism initiative in our community, that was unanimously supported. And then we got to a point where one of the most important groups that we were seeking to help given the context of why that issue came forward in the first place, is appearing at the meeting saying that they haven't been properly consulted with, and in fact are quite upset and using very strong language around why it is that what's being proposed is insufficient. So I take your point that it's a that the city as a whole, every single person involved in the city, from the council to administration to the mayor's office, can do a whole lot better with respect to improving our processes with respect to consultation.
Does the city have a policy around standards for good consultation, or is it implementing the kind of the patchwork of consultation requirements that come down as as pieces of different bits of provincial legislation?
Yeah, so another good point. There's legislative requirements. Let's start there, right? There's things you have to do depending on the thing that you're doing. So like take a zoning issue as a, for example, you have legislated requirements in order to, that you need to meet from a public consultation standpoint. Mail outs to people who are in the area that could potentially be affected, published in the media, blah, blah, blah. So the answer to your question is there are some best practices depending, and there's some let me start over. There's some requirements depending on what it is that you're doing. There are some best practices that I think we're getting better at. Take, for example, the Walk Wheel Windsor process. I thought that was an incredible public consultation initiative. I think that the Transit Windsor master plan, more than transit, we're hitting like all-time high bars with respect to public consultation and the community being able to have the opportunity to have feedback around major policy initiatives. 80 Knox, I'll acknowledge, not so much from the public consult standpoint, no doubt. I don't think it was zero there. And I think the city did meet some thresholds with respect to consultation that it needed to meet. And I can get into that if we want to. But and then on the other, on the anti-racism initiative, if you look back over the sort of the year that went, that was in between council saying we want to do something here to the meeting a week ago Monday, the mayor really did, to his credit, hold many meetings with folks, many of the folks in our community, including Ms. McCurdy, including the Diversity Council, our committee, excuse me, around sort of a lay of the land, almost like an environmental scan of what is going on in our community. And I think when the mayor, or when you see in the report and it says these groups were consulted, that's what the consultation was. And the folks who were, quote, being consulted at the time, perhaps, and not through no fault of their own, because it wasn't made clear to them by the mayor and whoever else was sort of putting the pieces of these meetings together, that that this is the consultation that we're going to use to inform the anti-racism policy development piece. And so maybe the fact that that wasn't spelled out clearly is where we get some of the like really animated or some of the language that we're hearing. I don't think that there was zero consultation. I think that there was insufficient in some respects, and perhaps even just poorly executed consultation that led to where we ended up on the Monday, where we approved the funding for the anti-racism initiative. And I think 80 Knox is a bit of a different situation. There was, I mean, you could argue that the consultation at the council meeting where we debated the rec master plan and all of that, that entire discussion focused on 80 Knox. That was all about 80 Knox, frankly, for a good hour and a half to 2 hours. Many delegates, many of the folks from the Friends of 80 Knox group attended, delegated, and frankly, when you look at the consultation and whether or not consultation had any impact on the ultimate policy, the recommendation was for the pool to close. But all of the issues that were raised at that meeting, saying the reasons why 80 Knox needs to stay open, were addressed in the transfer of those services to the Lancer pool. So to suggest that there was no consultation or nobody was listening to us, I don't think that that's correct. I think the ultimate outcome of what council decided to do isn't the same as what some people in the community wanted, but issues that were identified in those consultations were addressed. They just were.
Well, I don't know. In this case, you have two different committees. You have the Black Council and the Diversity Committee straight out saying, the city lied. And I understand the difference in interpretation in that the mayor's meetings might not have been viewed as consultations, but I mean, that alone says there's a big issue right there, especially if that's being used as a check mark on a box and as an endorsement, a forced endorsement without even requesting it, to say that this was approved and consulted on. Obviously there's a big issue there. And I mean, you have the chief of staff stressing exactly this point. We did it. What do you want from us? We heard from those discussions, and that's what fed into this point. So, I mean, it's tough because it goes to, what Doug was saying there. I mean, we talk about this week after week after week, is the consultation. So I guess my question to you is this, because now it's changed a bit. Are public consultations in Windsor applied equally?
Well, I think I just said no, they're not. And I don't know that they necessarily should be, because every issue is different and there's different things that you have to do to meet those thresholds of appropriate levels of consultation. So can we improve? I've said, I keep saying it, I agree. We need to do better. And the motion that I brought into that discussion was specifically recognizing the pieces that were missed and trying to fix those moving forward. So, I know what you're trying to ask. I just don't think it's exactly the right question.
Well, then let me ask the question. Let me ask the question then straight out. Are public consultations weaponized or utilized in this community in a way that ensures a certain outcome at the detriment of actual meaningful public engagement? What's your actual belief on that? And I don't want to talk about can we do better? Can we strive to do better? Of course we can. We all can. But what's your actual view on how this is done? Because I think a lot of people are saying it's very different for certain groups when it comes to what meaningful public engagement is. There's these pet projects, it seems, that get heralded and ushered through in a way that they're stick handled so much. I'm going to keep using metaphors here because I'm talking around it now. But what's your actual take on
it? Well, I'm not going to disagree that there's that there is everything that you see in a report, a public policy report, has some layer of politics attached to it. And the section that talks about who was consulted is not immune from that as well. Whether or not it's weaponized every time on every controversial topic, I don't know that that's the term that I would use, but it certainly is, it exists in print, and in order to establish a form of legitimacy to what is being brought forward and what is being recommended. Luckily, we have public meetings and an elected council with people who can bring independent voices into those discussions, because the report is one component of a process. We don't land and we don't do what is recommended by administration, regardless of who might have had their hands on it before it got in front of us all the time. This council moves. I think this council is very thoughtful and does what it thinks is right, regardless of, for many of us, regardless of who it's going to piss off. And I consider myself one of those people who will make those independent choices and point out the flaws in process when it occurs. So, the report is one piece, and what's printed in the report. But at the end of the day, human beings are going to make those decisions, and those decisions are for me influenced by who we spoke to, who I spoke to, who I noted in the various different forums that I look at in terms of where the discussion is. And the decisions ultimately land in the lap of the council, regardless of what's in the report.
So I hear you, Kieran, and I hear what you're saying. But inadequate public consultation closes off a tremendous opportunity for the community to influence the decision. When
I don't think there's a but there though. Like, well, what do I disagree with on that?
I'm not saying that you don't. I'm making a point. When it gets to council, there is a possibility for the community to organize, to delegate, to communicate in public, to talk to councillors. But I think one of the real challenges here is that the very people that are most often the most heavily impacted by policy in a negative way are the people whose voices aren't heard because, for whatever reason, they don't have that same ability to organize that other parts of the community do. They don't have that same ability to be plugged into the process. And if a consultation is designed to bypass the people in the community that might have a contrary view to what is going to be recommended, then it really is incumbent. The only line of defense, the only thing that's left, is the ward councillor and other councillors around the table to be able to cry foul. And I think that history has shown us that that is not adequate to stem the tide of something that is moving in a certain direction. I hear what you're saying about the character and the tenor of council. But my observation is that it is extremely difficult to find a majority around the table who are willing to significantly push back on something when everything is kind of flowing that way, when everything that is presented is flowing that way. And I think that's a problem. And not to plug my other podcast, but I'm going to. A few months ago, I had a chance to talk to Nader Charay of Environics about the way that their company helps municipalities do public consultation, uses demographics, uses their ability to understand a community to find the ways to reach out to underserviced members of the community. And I do encourage folks to listen to that 30-minute conversation, because I think there's a lot of value there. And ever since I had that conversation, I've always got that image in my mind of the way that the most forward-looking and most progressive municipalities in this country are doing public consultations, and how big the gap is between what they're doing and what we're doing here. And I hear everything that you're saying, Kieran, but to me, this is something of pretty big urgency when we only have an election every 4 years. And the ballot issues are usually a narrow set of issues that are focused on by the candidates and the media. And that, just because something isn't going to move votes, should not preclude it from having a serious consultation process and a serious effort to find out what the needs of the community are.
So I'll just, let me respond to that by saying, there's no doubt that where we ended up on that day was insufficient. How we got there, it was insufficient. I remain hopeful, optimistic, and I take the folks who want to do the programming, the MCC, at their word that they are going to fill that gap as we move forward through this process. And when I look at it, the anti-racism initiative, and I see what's on the table, $200,000. It's the beginning. It better be the beginning, because there's nothing that we'll be able to achieve with that amount of money that is going to, as people love to say, move the needle with respect to addressing systemic and real racism in our community. It won't. It'll get us off the finish line, or off the starting line. There's a tremendous amount of work to be done, and there's also a tremendous amount of opportunities to improve on that consultation front. And hopefully, my hope, beyond we'll get something productive out of what this investment will be, is that there'll be some lessons learned, and we'll take that feedback and work towards improving at the, from a process standpoint. This council's gotten beat up quite a bit the last month or so for doing things that at a high level, I think, are good things, and things that previous councils would never even have thought about doing, or wouldn't he, or would have shut down in, you know, in less than 20 seconds. $40 million of investment in the West Side. That's once in a lifetime. And I know some folks are not happy about losing aquatic services at one facility, but you're never going to get a chance at that $42 million again. That was it. And an anti-racism initiative, $200,000, meager though it is the beginning of a specific policy discussion that can bring us to a place where we haven't been willing to go for a long, long time. It's not been perfect. I acknowledge that, but I can't ignore the fact that it is in my view, a million miles away from where previous councils were in terms of making investments and taking deep dives into hard issues that they never wanted to touch before. So, you know, I acknowledge the problems, but I'm also going to celebrate those advances. They're not unnoteworthy at all. I've been, as much as I'm listening to the community in terms of how they feel about some of the things and how we got to these points, it's not lost on me that we're in a better place, I think, than we were before.
Yeah, you know, I guess, you know, it's fair. I think of this still, and I compare it to the segment coming up with University Avenue. That's a consultation period that's going to be 30 days versus a 7-day consultation period for 80 Knox after a full year of consultations with the university. So that's just, I hope that we can, you know, find that optimism that you clearly espouse. I've lost it, but you're on the inside, and, you know, maybe there are opportunities to refine and hone towards some better standards. And who knows, like, would it ever be possible to do a bylaw to like set some standards across the board for this consultation, and we can move on beyond this after that?
Okay, what do you mean again? Because what I've said on a few things is different issues have different requirements, and they just always will. So,
but does the minimum have to be what the bar is for Windsor? Is there not a way that we could have some type of standard at the very least where people could expect the same?
With respect, we do. It's a council meeting. Anyone in the public can say, I want to come and speak, and they have the same amount of time as I get to look at the issue, unpack it in terms of what's in front of them, what's being brought forward. Sometimes I have some more context because I'll have known that this report flows from the other just because I'm following along a little more closely. But, you know, that is the ultimate opportunity to be engaged. But again, I'm not saying we can't improve. I just don't know where where a uniform standard line beyond what we already have, because I don't think the implication that we have nothing is true. It isn't true. We could do better though. Yes.
Fair. I would say like a 30-day for every public consultation would be like a standard that could be set. But let's move beyond that regardless. There was a bit of real politics that came into play here on this topic as well before we move on to the next whole segment here. Diversity Committee Chair Peter Ija, he questioned the ethics of awarding the funding to the Multicultural Council because Councillor Francis serves as the organization's Director of Programs and Development. Now, I'll be clear, Councillor Francis did recuse himself from voting, but I guess I'm sure that this is where Doug would be looking at what we want to talk about as well here. The mayor's chief of staff, in response to this issue, he said, you know, these are obviously questions that people will raise, said Teleszewski, adding, but it's actually kind of unfortunate that folks would try to malign the MCC because that's where Fred Francis happens to work. Now, nobody maligned the MCC, and this is the same thing that sort of happened with Councillor Sleeman with the issues that we had with his voting with, you know, people potentially in the room, not in the room. We're still not quite sure where that issue lies, other than Councillor Sleeman can crack a joke and laugh at it himself. But there was a line that was said by the chief of staff that people were maligning Councillor Sleeman because of his age, which was not the case at all. What's with the scapegoating that's coming out of the mayor's office here? Are you seeing it the way that you know I'm seeing it?
Is that for me?
Yes, that is for you.
Scapegoating. Not sure if that's the term I would use. I'll just say this. In terms of the implication that there was something untoward with respect to the way that the sole sourcing of it of the programming went forward, I don't think that that's the case, and I don't think that that's a constructive comment. And I have a tremendous amount of respect for Mr. LJ. I've known Peter for years, and I in fact, when I was a young man, I very much looked up to him, and still do. But I knew him much better back then, and I know the work that he's done in the community and have the utmost respect. The implication that there was something untoward because there was a council connection, I think, is a bridge too far with respect to the commentary as well. You can question whether or not sole sourcing was appropriate, but to suggest that there was some sort of a direct connection to a member of council because of their employment, and that's why there was a determination made to go with the MCC is not appropriate in my opinion.
So I want to pick up on that, and I think that's fair enough, Kieran. I agree with you. I think we have enough conspiracy theories in this town, and it's not necessary to construct them. At the same time, this contract was sole sourced, and there had to be an understanding that people in the community would make that connection. There had to be an understanding that that would happen. To my understanding, there is no particular reason why a contract like this needed to be sole sourced, and there has been ample time to issue a request for proposals and test the waters and get prices and get input from a number of people who may do this type of work besides the MCC. So I guess my question to you is, why would you do it this way?
Yeah, so I sit at that table, so I'm not going to pass the buck, right? It wasn't my process though. I didn't sole source this personally, but I did vote in support of us proceeding. So I accept my role in us proceeding as we did. I'll say that I do accept that the MCC does have I don't think it's 100% on point expertise in the area of anti-racism, but they are an organization in our community that I was compelled by that fact, not fact alone, but that fact certainly was compelling to me, that they do as an organization have a long-standing have been serving this community for literally decades, and do have a certain degree of understanding of this community that a number of other organizations, perhaps not from the region, though they may have experience in the space, not the same understanding of the region and the space itself. So I guess in terms of, if you're asking me to explain why I supported it, thinking about it from that sole sourcing perspective, I did think that there could have been a greater opportunity for us to tender this through a tendering process. But because of the respect that I have for the organization itself, frankly, it was enough for me to overlook what I think is a really important part of trying to figure out how to access services. The best practice is to tender for something like this, and we didn't do that. And it was only because it really was, at the end of the day, a partner that I think is a really strong partner, and one that really does have enough of the tools to be able to execute what they, what we have the opportunity to execute, given the funding that we were putting into it.
You don't have to respond to this, Kieran, but I would suggest, at least from my perspective, I think that putting conspiracy theories about, who works where aside, I think that the perception, at least by some around the council table, was that the MCC is a safe place to put a file like this because they are a good community partner. They're a longstanding part of this community, and they're not going to embarrass anybody. That's my personal view, and I don't think that's a good way to grapple with a topic like this, where taking the safe path has been far too often the choice that has been made, taking the safe path versus the right path. That's my belief as to why this choice was made. And you know, I think it's really unfortunate because, you know, you combine the consultation with, or the lack of consultation or the perceived lack of consultation, however you want to characterize it, you combine that with the sole source and you have a super important initiative that, where I agree with you, Kieran, is that this is a critically important initiative for our community and it's starting under a cloud and it didn't have to.
That's probably correct. I'll just say this. There may have been a certain degree of trepidation with respect to who are the other potential partners that we could consider to sort of put together this programming. I don't know that it was necessarily or primarily about, we don't want to be embarrassed by somebody who might recommend a whole bunch of things that we may not think is appropriate for us to proceed upon. Perhaps it was more about, we need to make sure that if we're going to make this investment, that we have a partner that we think can deliver the goods at the end of the day. By the goods, I mean a report that we can act upon, that's going to be done in a manner that we're confident is going to be sort of meet those thresholds that need to be met for council consideration. Just as a partner that's been competently delivering services in the community for decades. Not to say that there aren't other organizations that are serving the community in different capacities, but to get to the level where you're in this type of a policy delivery relationship with a level of government, I think is another level that organizations sort of strive to achieve in their own organizational development. And, you know, perhaps the MCC is not alone, but on a very short list of organizations that are at that level in the community right now.
Well, you could.
Oh, Jon, you're silent now. What's happened?
I took a couple seconds there to reconsider what I was going to say.
Okay.
No, my recommendation, you know, take 2 cents for what they are. Re-engage with these two committees here, because just moving out of this segment, you've got members of the diversity committee saying they feel disillusioned. Some are considering resigning from the committee. That's an issue. And to hear the committee chair say that they're the most ineffective and most toothless committee that you'll ever find because that's how the city set it up and it was intended that way, to ignore them from day one. Like, those are really, really strong comments there. And I can say from, you know, personal experience, I served as chair of the Mayor's Youth Advisory Committee. And, you know, I definitely can empathize with what it's like to sit on a committee that was, at least from my perspective, designed to push a political agenda for a specific person. And that's tough. So not to say that it was designed that way, and not to say that it's going to only go in the most negative of ways, but, you know, try to find a way to re-engage with them, because there's a lot of people here who want to be engaged and working towards it.
Last point I want to make on that. The motion explicitly directs council and administration to engage the diversity committee throughout this process and the MCC, number one. Number two, and this is something that every chair of every advisory
make sure that they know that they're being engaged, and that it's not just like that they're having a phone call with the mayor's office.
Sure.
And
well, look,
they don't realize it.
Do you think it's going to be better than what was before?
Let's hope so.
I do. There's specific council direction on record.
Yep.
Do this. They have to follow that direction. Number two, every advisory committee, whether they're aware of it or not, if you pass a motion, guess what? It comes to council. It opens the floor. That is the power of the advisory committee. So pass a motion. Pass a motion. I'll say it again. Pass a motion.
Okay. There you have it. Well, thank you for engaging in that back and forth there, Councillor. Much appreciated. Really want to be talking about this segment. Council's voted unanimously to establish a city-led homelessness hub obviously with hopes that federal and provincial government funding to support the plan could be found moving forward. Windsor Star's Dave Battagello put this one out. A steering committee will be put together to work to find a location, push for government funding, and assemble social service community partners, all in looking towards construction of this project, anticipated to begin in a year, amazingly. Now, we were talking about this, Councillor. The blueprint for this planned homelessness hub is based on the recent success of the city's H4, that's Homelessness and Housing Help Hub initiative, that was established on an emergency basis when overnight shelters at the Downtown Mission and Salvation Army were forced to temporarily shut down due to COVID-19 outbreaks, with operations primarily based out of Waterworld. Now, I want to stop right there because you were going off in the pre-chat about how great the H4 program has been. So just tell the audience a little bit about, obviously we know how it came to be through COVID, but what worked really well about it? What did it identify? And like, how did we get to this point now where we're at a unanimous vote of yes?
Yeah, and look, this is the story. I haven't seen Dave's story yet, so thanks for pointing that out. But I think it was it's one of those underreported success stories that really needs that to me is one of the most significant things that council has done or council will do or participate in. The H4, and I should give full credit to our administration, specifically our housing commissioner, our social services commissioner, Yelena Payne, our housing director, Debbie Cerconi, and there's a number of people in that department that I'm going to forget some names, so I'm not going to go down the list, but we have some incredible people working in our social services administration. And what they realized as we got into sort of let's call it the medium stages of the pandemic, where the virus was starting to creep into different communities that were experiencing homelessness, we recognized that we had an urgent need to respond and to be able to provide services for those folks, because where they were consuming services at that time were becoming unavailable. So we responded, and it really kind of like it fills me up to see how much those people that work for the city of Windsor and are at high level positions understand the community that they're trying to serve, the challenges that we have, and what they need to do, what we need to do, or what we can do to address those challenges. And COVID, quite frankly, and it was said at the meeting by folks other than myself, COVID, actually, it was Joyce Zuck actually said it first this way, that it actually created an opportunity for us to reimagine how we deliver those services. And we were already kind of on that path in terms of the outreach workers that the city had funded to help people, to go directly to people who were experiencing homelessness or mental health challenges, to find them in the places where they are, and to try to connect them with the services that they need to connect with in order to get better, or to find housing, or whatever it is that they needed from a social service standpoint. And what the H4 hub did is it created an actual bricks and mortar physical space at the old Waterworld facility, where folks could come, and there were a number of different service providers who were operating out of there, and helping to once again connect folks with those services, help them to get housed, help them to access mental health services, addiction treatment, whatever those things, or whatever the things that they identified as a need. It was a great opportunity for us to be able to sort of serve those folks in that space, and in a place where many of the folks who are experiencing homelessness or needing those services felt comfortable attending. They created that environment that was welcoming, that was perhaps not quite as institutional. Come in, sit in a waiting room, wait, sit in front of a desk with somebody. It was a whole model for service delivery that evolved organically out of the ashes, the rubble of the pandemic, and gave us this great opportunity to sort of reimagine how we deliver those services. And now we'd always been talking, even since the beginning of the term, one of the early conversations I had with the mayor is, we need to have some shelter services that we have under our own sort of direct control. And he agreed, to his credit. How we get there was the question. Where's the money going to come from? And what that type of facility is going to look like, where it's going to be located, what services are going to be there. That the H4 hub gave us the template that we can now bring to a purpose-built facility to deliver those services. And I think that, council going from having to, scratch and claw in the previous council to get an outreach worker or two to reach people on the street to help them, to now $10 million facility that we're going to city-run facility or city-owned facility where we'll be partnering with service providers to deal with these issues, purpose-built to deal with these issues, is a massive evolution of council's position from where it was previously. And I'm delighted that we had a unanimous vote on this. And not surprised, because it was, administration had a great report. And what I really loved to hear was the delegations from the service providers talking about the successes of the H4, because I think that that's a critical component as well. To your point, Doug, about consultation, public consultation, as much as it's people who are affected or delivering services telling you, telling you what they need to do better or for things to be better in the community. But it's also those folks telling their story to the rest of the community. And what happened at council on Monday, this past Monday, was a good hour-long discussion with some of the most knowledgeable and excellent service providers in our community doing some of the hardest work, addressing homelessness, addiction, and mental health, talking about how they deliver services and how we need to and should support the reimagining of delivering those services to the community, to the benefit of not just those folks that we're serving, but the community as a whole. And that was a great moment. It was a great discussion. You can see I'm excited about it. I think there's going to be some challenging discussions ahead around specifically where. That's why I think I'm surprised the year. I think that that's an aggressive timeline. I would support that, of course, but where this facility will be located is going to be another challenging discussion that we're going to have in the community, no doubt.
So I want to dig in on a couple things here that you said, and thank you for that summary, Kieran. It was excellent. To what extent do you think that this model was developed from existing best practices or ideas that already existed, and to what extent did it emerge from the COVID response?
It's both. So, we often use this thing as, so we need a made in Windsor solution for this, right? And I hear that all the time. And yes, we do. Of course we do. Every community is unique. But even in the report, there's a couple of mentions of different communities where they've created this like hub model to deliver, these services, the wraparound services, as they call it in some instances, to folks who are, who need the services that would be delivered out of these types of facilities. So it's not a complete reinvention. We're taking the best practices that exist and that we're seeing other communities have success with. We're applying them, and what the H4, the H4 hub, and I said this off air, maybe you were just trying to set me up for my quote. Thanks, if you were, but the H4 hub was the proof of concept. It was the proof that those best practices work in our community as well. And it actually is the thing that we needed, I think, in order for council to say $10 million, let's get the money from wherever we can get it and let's do it. 9 point something, but let's round up to 10.
Now, are you confident that you're going to be able to find it from upper levels of government?
Yeah, there's the program is called the Rapid Housing Initiative. We're already pre-approved for that funding. Notionally is I guess the way to put it. Now we have to just put this proposal in front of them. So I'm, you know, I'm very optimistic that will be approved for the funding. And you know, by the way, I think that we're too far into this now, where if we're not successful, we'll find a way.
Now, something that did come up as well at council was, of course, there's going to be, you know, annual costs for upkeep, even if the capital costs come.
Operation. Yeah.
But that was rebutted in what was explained as, you know, there's already added expenses that council deals with, whether it's from police or emergency room visits or, you know, parks. The point being is that there's money that's already being expended right now. So do you think that, like, what's going to be the financial outcome, I guess, overall? Do you see this being a net positive, even financially?
I don't know about net positive, and that's the thing is, like, so I'm the cost of doing business guy on council. Or the cost of doing nothing. What is it? And that question applies to so many different policy areas. So and this is one of the best areas to really think of it, to think of investments through that lens. Operationally, if we have this hub, will we house more people? Will that take away? Will that mean that less people will be visiting the hospital? There'll be less law enforcement opportunities, less incarceration. The answer to that, our hope obviously is yes, 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 yes. How does that impact municipal budgets? It's debatable because you're talking about multiple layers of government having a hand in the service delivery of the different areas that I just identified. The bottom line is, though, it will free up resources in the community to be able to, should there be more successes than we've already had, to do other things. And also, again, proving the concept, it'll allow senior levels of government to have more funds available to perhaps fund even more initiatives in this area. So I think that it's hard to quantify in terms of what the municipality specifically will benefit by implementing all of these programs, because and you have to also remember, you're talking for some of these programs, they're, as they call, flow through dollars that the province provides directly to the community or to the city that go directly into those programmings or into those programs. But at the end of the day, I think that there's just so many net positives that will both financial and social that will result from what it is that we're doing, that there's no way we could turn back from this.
So I want to just reel back to the outbreaks that happened at the downtown mission during the COVID pandemic, which of course is still ongoing. And to the extent that that created an opportunity here, would there have been an appetite to stand this up as a city-led service offering if the largest shelter in town had successfully managed the pandemic? And the other piece that I want to add to that is that, at least, you know, anecdotally, in terms of what I hear, the downtown mission doesn't have the best reputation for playing nice in the sandbox, whether that be with the city as a partner or with other agencies as partners. And, you know, like I said, that's anecdotal. What would have prevented this kind of model from developing as a bottom-up community-led initiative?
That's an interesting question. What would have prevented it? Let me say this. You heard me say at the beginning, or when we started this discussion, that the mayor was supportive of a city-run shelter, temporary shelter facility. And I raised this discussion with him in my first conversation with him as an elected councillor, and we were in agreement. So it was always going to be how and where, or how and when, how, when, where. But there was notionally that high level. So I don't think that the decisions that were made on Monday with respect to us proceeding with this housing homelessness hub, if you will, to continue to use the H3, I guess, but H4 acronym. Yeah, I think that there was a recognition. I know at the admin level, as I mentioned earlier, our social services people really understood that this is a a best way forward. And we were getting there incrementally with the introduction of outreach workers, city-funded outreach workers, trying to deliver those services directly to people. Would we have gotten there within this time frame had the pandemic not occurred? I think the answer to that question is no. But I will say this: one of the things that we also that we're kind of forgetting within the operational model is part of the expenditures that we're absorbing is housing people temporarily in hotels and motels. And I'm sure that you remember just a few years ago, I believe it was Lady Lafrette who did let's call it the protest, where she was housing herself in a hotel in the city of Windsor in order to show the challenges that people are experiencing when they live under those types of conditions. And that those challenges are real. The costs are real too. We have the opportunity to I want to be careful about my language here, because I'm not saying we're taking all of that money and we're going to put it into the operational dollars for the new housing hub, but there's some operational dollars that are being used to house people in those circumstances. And we're now going to have the opportunity to house people in a facility that we control, that the city of Windsor directly owns. We'll have different service providers within it. It's not going to be a partnership where we're with the Salvation Army and they're housing people. It's going to be our facility. And I think that in and of itself presents opportunities to find efficiencies within the operational dollars and what may be required to fund the programs that we'll be delivering out of those services in comparison to the way we do it now. There's savings there for sure. I don't know where exactly they are, but they're there.
It's exciting all around. I mean, if wraparound services can be included, if the cost is going to be covered here, again, as you said, the win-win-win is clearly right there. And you've got so many different groups that are all on board with it. Yeah. Unanimous council approval. This is the kind of thing I'd love to be able to, send back in time to 2016 and say, here's a glimpse at what's to be. Things aren't perfect in Windsor, but I mean, there's a pandemic. It's been awful for us for 2 full years now. But there's positives coming out of it. But let's move on to our last topic tonight. Be really quick on this, and then we'll get on to 4-year considerations. Going to bookend our public consultation talks with public consultation sought for the proposed redesign of University and Victoria. This is looking for input on the stretch of University, 3.5 kilometers between Huron Church Road and McDougall Street. And an environmental study was commissioned in 2018 to figure out different ways of reconfiguration to integrate walking, bicycle features, and other modes of active transportation. The city website says that as a 4-lane road originally designed to accommodate streetcars, University Avenue West is excessively wide and underutilized, and they're looking at a complete overhaul of the east-west corridor to reallocate the land uses in the public right-of-way, which is being proposed, redesigning the road and sidewalks, all to accommodate more modern and sustainable modes of transportation, including green space, and to facilitate new uses with broader community benefits. What have you been hearing on the inside already about this? Do you have anything you could say, like what this might actually end up looking like? I mean, I know it's looking for like consultation right now, but like, is there
John, what does the administration already want to do before they talk to people about what should be done?
I'm not saying is there something that's specifically drawn up, but like when people go to do this survey, this consultation, like what can they expect when they hear, facilitate new uses with broader community benefits? I mean, it's such a wide road. What's on the table here, I guess?
Well, I mean, I think the full gamut of different active transportation facilities is potentially considered or going to be considered. I think that any of the traffic calming measures that council is looking at Vision Zero, that stakeholder group is going to be very much involved. We're going to look to, I think, implement the safest, most transportation diverse stretch of road that this community has ever seen. And I'm incredibly excited about what this process is going to look like. Some folks want this to and you think about that piece and you marry that up with the community investment plan that we have for the Wyandotte University corridor as well. I think that you want to talk transformational. We're stacking transformational on top of transformational. We also have the development that's going to happen on the Fairmont property or on the former Grace site. We have the development also happening at the at University in Crawford. This stretch of road is going to be fundamentally reimagined. I already see in the community a tremendous amount of excitement, and I share their excitement. I can't go into, like, I'm not going to be able to say, okay, John, you can expect to see A, B, C, or D. What I do hope that we do replicate at, in one of the earlier topics, I talked about the Walk Wheel Windsor process. I talked about the transportation master plan and the processes that we the active transportation, the public transit master plan and the public consultation processes that we developed in order to create the end version of that product. And I think that if we replicate those processes, numerous public forums, opportunities for people to be engaged online through any one of our portals, 311, as I said, in-person meetings, Zoom, you name it, as well as even this would be maybe the opportunity for us to really get into it if we wanted to improve on that public consult process, some charretting. If we were to go down that road, that might be really even more interesting and maybe even another step forward for us to really get to an end product where, my dream would be to have something that we have end design fully funded in the capital plan, that all of the folks that should be involved in the discussion, had been involved in the discussion, feel like they've been heard, see what it is, and love what they see. If that were to be able to occur, I would be delighted, either as a councillor, community member, you name it, because I do think it does represent that opportunity to get so many things right, and we're right at the beginning. It's the right time. There's no, oh, we're too far down the road. We have enough time to do every single piece of this right. I hope we do. I'll certainly be working towards that.
Last question about this. I guess this would fall into the Windsor Works plan, right? I mean, because this is, it's connecting the university with the city and everything. So I guess, is there going to be a university component as well with this, because it's linking the two campuses together?
Sure. I mean, I also think that the college, in terms of education stakeholders, they have a presence downtown and
right on University, of course.
Absolutely. So it's and on Riverside Drive, the St. Clair Center for the Arts, don't forget, yes. Right? Of course.
We can keep naming all of the different.
Well, sure, but they're there, and they're going to be impacted by what that artery looks like. So and to your point around it being fitting into the Windsor Works framework, absolutely it does. This is improved public transportation. This is improved relations between key stakeholders with actual hard infrastructure and investment to make those things a reality and to strengthen those bonds. So I think that there's so many reasons why a very a solid investment. I don't want to overstate it as well. I mean, we're talking about an important stretch of road. It's a big city. I'm very supportive of us getting things right on University Avenue, because I do think of it, the width of that roadway, that literally is a blank canvas. There's nothing that's a constraint from a space perspective. We're not dealing with any time pressure. So let's make this process one that's effective and make the appropriate investment to hit all those benchmarks and achieve all those goals. I think the opportunity is there.
Well, What a great opportunity. If you're looking to provide input, you do have time, as the input period is from the 27th of July to August 24th. Head to citywindsor.ca and you'll see information there for the University Avenue and Victoria Avenue environmental assessment. We will move on to, for your consideration, we have the councillor here, Councillor McKenzie. We will give you councillor honors, which of course means that you get to go first.
Thanks, John. So I love this segment, and I have a minute, so I'll try to be brief. One of the things that we passed recently, not at the previous council meeting, the one prior to that, and that was when we did have that big discussion about the anti-racism initiative. One thing that was much more positive in terms of the scope of the discussion was the fact that council passed and supported unanimously that we will adopt an Indigenous land claim acknowledgement at the beginning of all of our council meetings. And I think that that is a very, very important step forward for our community with respect to acknowledging an important founding community in our region. And more to that, beyond just the land claim acknowledgement, which is an incredible, I think, a very important thing that we need, that we are going to do. We have created a Indigenous Advisory Committee that is going to now sit as an advisory committee to council and give us the opportunity to have input from people from First Nations communities from our region on any number of issues. And again, it's going to be an advisory committee. We do need, as a community or as a city and an administration, to work a little bit harder to make those to help those advisory committees to be more aware of the tools that they have at their disposal. But this is going to exist. It's going to be, and it will provide a portal for folks who come from First Nation communities across our region to be able to advise us on the issues that are impacting them, on everything from social issues to development to you name it. So I'm extremely excited for all of that to move forward, and grateful that my council colleagues supported administration and the report and the council question that I brought forward a number of months ago on this.
Great to hear. Glad to hear that that's moving forward. That's a really meaningful thing. Kudos. Thanks on that. So I get that you now have to say that's for your consideration.
For your consideration.
Thank you.
Thank you. I will go up next. Mine is, again, it's just the consultation. We've got a great opportunity here, as we just discussed earlier, with the University Avenue and Victoria Avenue. The consultation is open from the 27th of July to August 24th. Head to citywindsor.ca, search University Avenue, Victoria Avenue environmental assessment. It's there. The opportunity is there for you to be able to comment, to contribute, to provide input. Full month of being open, roughly. So you can't say that you didn't have the opportunity. I'm going to stress it because it's a great opportunity. And then beyond that one as well, in the same vein of public comment, the Windsor Essex Community Opioid and Substance Strategy is holding a series of virtual town hall meetings to discuss the two proposed locations for the consumption and treatment service facility. Those are taking place on August 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th. So if you just do a Google search for, Windsor Essex Community Opioid and Substance Strategy, you will find that information. We will link to it as well. It's a good opportunity. For all the complaining that we do on the show about public comment, it would be remiss to not, recommend and advocate to take part in it as robustly as possible. I won't be, because my internet's going to go down before the date is available for me to comment. I'm joking. Anyways, that's for your consideration. Doug, you're up last.
Thanks, John. July 26 marked the third anniversary of the passing of our colleague and friend, Mark Buscariel. Mark Buscariel was a critically important person in our community. He was a business owner, he was an activist, he was a leader, and he was a friend to many. I wanted to remember Mark today and point that out to everyone. If you'd like to understand a tiny, tiny sliver of the reason why we all loved Mark, You can go back and listen to the Rose City Politics episode titled Remembering Mark Bascariel, which is a 2-hour episode. I believe Kieran and I actually split the hosting duties that day. And we play a number of clips of Mark on the air, showing as many facets of his personality as we could. Then we had an extended conversation with many folks from the community remembering Mark. So I encourage you to go and check that out. And the best way that you can remember Mark Bascariel is to understand the kind of person that he was and be like Mark, for your consideration.
That's a very nice one. So this has been a show. Councillor, thanks for joining us tonight. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Yeah, we really appreciate it. Yeah, I think you caught both of us off guard there, Doug.
Sorry, guys.
No, it's okay. It made us, a little bit more introspective there at the end. Mark touched us all in very different ways, but all very much in the same way. Can't think of a community builder, someone who cared more, who engaged more, who did more, both on stage, if you will, but also backstage. And it's the amount that he did backstage that nobody really knew about until, you did start to find out about it, because word leaks and people talk, and you start to see how many things he had his hands in one way or another, not directing operations, but just simply helping or giving or donating or supporting. He was one of a kind. He was truly one of a kind. But yeah, no, this has been a show, and we can't express enough thanks to you, Councillor McKenzie, for joining us, putting up with the grilling and the hard questions there throughout. We blame you for all of the poor public consultation in the city. It's unfortunate, but you're the one. The buck stops with you, my friend.
I'm willing to accept that weight, John. Thank you for inviting me on.
Glad to have you. Our regular panel tonight included Doug Sartori and myself, John Lidke. If you like what you have heard, please consider supporting us by becoming a Patreon subscriber, patreon.com/Rose City Politics. We are in print monthly in BizX Magazine. We have a brand new column coming out for September, so check that out in print. We'll be online as well at bizxmagazine.com. We are on all of your socials. We are wherever you get your podcasts, and we are able to broadcast live on tape thanks to the kind support of LiUNA 625, Building Better Communities. We will be back, and it will be August. And that's going to be a whole different month. We'll see what we'll be talking about too next week.